It's December 9th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the martial law saga. Following the failure of the impeachment vote against President Yoon Suk Yeol, the country's ruling party pledged to stabilize the leadership, while demanding that the South Korean leader step down as a president early and in an orderly manner. Prime Minister Han Kang vowed to keep domestic and foreign affairs intact. Prosecutors have confirmed that President Yoon is a suspect on charges of insurrection, while the former defense minister Kim Yong-hyun, who is believed to have advised Yoon to declare martial law, already had 2 rounds of questioning by prosecutors. The fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime after 13 years of war in Syria has now ended more than 50 years of brutal dictatorship by his family. Assad and his family had reportedly fled to Moscow and were granted a political asylum. Prime Minister Han Kang and ruling party leader Han Dong-won have pledged to stabilize state affairs and address pressing domestic and foreign challenges. Now, this includes calls for President Yoon to step down and stay away from governance. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
Prime Minister Han Kang pledged the government will keep calm and carry on handling domestic and foreign challenges amid the political storm following President Yoon Suk Yeol's short-lived martial law order last week. After a motion to impeach the president fell through in Parliament, the Prime Minister held a joint press conference with ruling party leader Han Dong-won on Sunday in their aim to, quote, ensure all state functions operate smoothly, while making it clear that the nation's executive will not have a part in domestic or foreign policy.
Above all else, it is crucial to ensure that there is no disruption in state affairs. We will do our utmost every moment to serve the people so that the safety of the nation and the daily lives of its citizens remain unshaken.
The diplomat turned Prime Minister stressed the need to continue the country's foreign policy initiatives in an ever-changing geopolitical environment. Seeking cooperation with the incoming Donald Trump administration remains a vital task for the country.
Maintaining a robust ROK-US alliance and strengthening security cooperation among South Korea, the United States and Japan are critical and pressing tasks. Led by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the whole cabinet will work tirelessly to preserve trust with our allies, including the US, Japan and other friendly nations.
On economic and social challenges facing the nation, Han vowed to focus on people's livelihoods, respond swiftly to financial and foreign exchange risks, as well as strengthen law and order and public safety. He called on the National Assembly to cooperate in passing the government's budget bill. Going forward, the PM and ruling party chief agreed to hold regular meetings. The show of cooperation between the 2 officials indicates their push for President Yoon Suk Yeol to step down in an orderly way, rather than face impeachment, which could disrupt the government's functions and paralyze major policy initiatives. The opposition Democratic Party of Korea heavily criticized the approach, deeming it unconstitutional and vowed weekly impeachment motions. The South Korean constitution allows the Prime Minister to act as interim leader only when the president is unable to fulfill duties due to death, resignation or impeachment. As for President Yoon, the troubled leader has stayed silent since his apology to the public. His weekly meeting with the Prime Minister on Monday was cancelled according to the PM's office, although he has accepted ministerial resignations and named new state officials. Yoon stated on Saturday that he would leave state affairs to the ruling party and the government, but has not commented on their push for his early resignation. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And both the National Assembly Speaker and the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea chair criticized Han's announcement on Sunday, saying the new way of running the government was unconstitutional. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
No regard for the Constitution or the people of South Korea. That's how the Speaker of the National Assembly, Woo Won-sik, on Sunday described plans by Prime Minister Han Kang and ruling People Power Party Chair Han Dong-hoon about how the government will be run between the Prime Minister and the ruling PPP.
The Constitution of the Republic of Korea provides procedures to suspend the powers of the president and remove them from office when they commit a serious violation of the Constitution or laws, the impeachment process.
He added the authority granted to presidents by the citizens of the country can't simply be yielded to others at will, and that Yoon has no right to transfer that to the people of his choice. Woo also said during his press briefing that Prime Minister Han Duck-soo called him after the announcement to set up a meeting with Woo to discuss the situation. Woo says he rejected the request as he believes impeachment is the only option at this point. The main opposition Democratic Party of Korea chair Lee Jae-myung also called the announcement unconstitutional and that it is in fact another coup.
How is it possible to officially announce such an absurd idea of temporarily sidelining the president's authority without the president being stripped of his powers, and having the prime minister and the ruling party leader jointly exercise presidential powers?
Citing Yoon's decision to accept the resignations of those involved in the declaration of martial law, as well as his new appointments to certain positions since Wednesday, he said President Yoon is still acting as a president. He also said there will be another impeachment motion against Yoon this coming Saturday, exactly a week after the first one, saying it's the only way to deal with the current situation. Meanwhile, under heavy pressure due to their decision to boycott the impeachment vote last Saturday, senior lawmakers of at least 4 terms of the ruling PPP are set to meet on Monday morning to discuss future plans. And as the PPP floor leader Chu Kyung-ho resigned following the boycott, the ruling party's leader is set to call up lawmakers of at least 3 terms to discuss electing a replacement on Monday. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In the meantime, President Yoon has been booked as a suspect on charges of treason, while the police have raided the former defense minister's residence and office. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
Investigations have begun over the declaration of martial law on December 3rd. Prosecutors have confirmed that President Yoon Suk Yeol has been named as a suspect on charges of treason. On Sunday, during the press briefing, the head of the Special Prosecution Unit said multiple complaints have been filed regarding the president, and that Yoon being named as a suspect would be accurate when there are such filings. While saying the investigation would address both insurrection and abuse of power allegations, the special unit's head vowed that the team would do its best not to leave any suspicions.
The Special Investigation Headquarters handling the martial law case will do its best to ensure that no suspicions remain regarding this critical national incident.
On Sunday, the prosecution office's special investigation team grilled the former defense minister Kim Yong-hyun, a key figure of the martial law declaration. Kim voluntarily appeared at the Seoul Central Prosecutor's office early on Sunday and was taken into custody at a detention facility in eastern Seoul under emergency arrest provisions. While he reportedly admitted that he suggested the declaration of martial law to the president and ordered the martial law forces to enter the National Assembly, he said there was nothing illegal or unconstitutional. As the prosecution has 48 hours to detain and question the suspect since the emergency arrest, the prosecution is expected to file for a court warrant late Monday night. The prosecution also questioned Park An-soo, who was the martial law commander, as a witness and reportedly asked Park about his role and the instructions he received before and after the declaration of martial law. The police have also formed their own special investigation team and raided the official residence and office of former Defense Minister Kim. They confiscated a cell phone and 17 other digital devices, including a laptop, on Sunday. Meanwhile, regarding the separate probes that the prosecution and police have launched, the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials sent letters to each of them, requesting them to send the case to the CIO, citing concerns over an overlapping of jurisdiction. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
So President Yoon avoided the worst-case scenario, impeachment. Still, his political future remains murky as he is now under investigation for insurrection. We connect with lawyer Kim Ji-soo this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, more hurdles appear to be lying ahead for President Yoon Suk Yeol for now. Will President Yoon be able to carry out duties and his roles as the president?
Well, President Yoon Suk Yeol's ability to perform his presidential duties is severely compromised right now due to the ongoing investigation into treason charges related to his recent martial law declaration. Legally, while the sitting president in South Korea is generally immune from prosecution, the immunity and treason does not extend to charges of insurrection or treason. Politically, Yoon's active role as a president is also already paralyzed. His absence from scheduled meetings, including those with senior aides and the prime minister, underscores the functional dormancy of his administration. And this vegetative state of the presidential office is further amplified by the People Power Party, also known as 국민의힘's call for his early resignation, signalizing growing isolation even from his allies. So it is highly unlikely that President Yoon can continue to fulfill his presidential duties in any meaningful capacity.
So it looks like he'll be absent from political scenes for now, but the opposition camp is pushing for another impeachment motion this weekend. But what other cards does the opposition camp have? Any other legal options other than just issuing an impeachment motion every week with no limit?
Well, so there is the filing a motion every week is the best option they can have right now, because technically the opposition can just keep issuing impeachment motions since there are no explicit legal limits. However, there is also a principle called 일사부재의 non-repetition rule that imposes a kind of a limit. And under the non-repetition principle, an identical impeachment motion cannot be reintroduced within the same parliamentary session. And this restriction, however, only applies to ongoing sessions, meaning once the session concludes, the motion can legally be submitted again in a new session. So Democratic Party has already announced its plans to reintroduce the impeachment motion after the current regular session ends. And if this motion fails, they intend to convene consecutive short extra sessions to continuously submit impeachment motions. So this tactical approach demonstrates the opposition's resolve to pursue action against President Yoon Suk Yeol through careful use of parliamentary procedures, and it seems to be the best option they can have right now.
Well, it looks like it's going to be a long battle between the opposition camp and also President Yoon Suk Yeol. But what's even more concerning for President Yoon himself is that he is now under investigation for insurrection related to the martial law order last week. The question is, how far will investigations on President Yoon go?
Well, this kind of development is quite unprecedented in South Korean history. So there was a case of prior President Chun Doo-hwan, but it was only after he ended his term as presidency. So it is the first time a sitting president is under investigation as a suspect in a case of insurrection and treason. And under the Constitution, such kind of treason is one of the few crimes where a immunity is not applied. So the investigation scope will likely extend to analyzing whether Yoon directly orchestrated actions that disrupted democratic institutions. And with his designation as a suspect, it is increasingly likely that prosecutors will pursue detailed questioning and potentially seeking access to sensitive locations such as presidential residence or offices to gather evidence. And recent cases such as the search of defense ministry definitely suggest that there is a no space is off limit if it is relevant to this kind of investigation.
I see. Then the presidential office is yet to make a comment on this investigation against President Yoon. We haven't heard anything from the top office. What legal options do you think the top office is considering at the moment then?
Well, first of all, the silence from the presidential office reflects a strategic pause. It is clear that they're taking a moment to carefully access their legal and political strategy in this unprecedented situation. And with President Yoon now being a suspect in a treason case, their options are limited by highly significant. So first of all, they'll be focusing on his legal defense, definitely. And while President Yoon has stated that he's going to not avoid legal or political responsibility, his legal team is undoubtedly examining ways to challenge the insurrection charges. And these could include, during the evidence, arguing that the martial law declaration was just a way to prevent national security measures, or he could shift responsibility to advisors like former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun. And given Yoon's background as a former prosecutor general, we can expect a highly technical legal defense. However, with growing calls for Yoon's early resignation, the presidential office may also be weighing a potential exit strategy. An exit strategy in this context refers to a coordinated plan for President Yoon to step down in a way that minimizes legal and political damage while stabilizing the current crisis. And it is difficult to predict with certainty that what kind of legal steps the presidential official might take. But as a critical institution of government, we are hoping that they will act in accordance with the principles of justice and uphold the values of democracy.
Definitely. And last but not least, former Defense Minister Kim, like you mentioned, he was arrested and questioned by prosecutors over the weekend. Now, does he have any legal options to defend himself?
Well, Kim has already been served with a formal arrest warrant, and the investigation will keep focusing on gathering evidence to establish intent, particularly around whether his actions were coordinated with President Yoon as a part of a larger strategy to support dissent. And the recent revelation that Kim has changed his mobile phones prior to his arrest raises serious questions about potential obstruction of justice. And strategically, Kim's defense will likely emphasize that he was just acting under orders to protect national security, which is an attempt to deflect responsibility onto higher authorities. However, this approach is improbable because it could simply implicate President Yoon directly, potentially expanding the political fallout, and will have profound implications for both legal accountability and political alignments in the country. And Kim Yong-hyun's legal journey is intricately tied to President Yoon's investigation for now, and the public should closely follow both cases to understand how justice and democracy are upheld in time of crisis.
Indeed. Thanks so much for connecting with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, following the failure of the impeachment vote at the weekend, the benchmark KOSPI opened down 1.47% at 2,392 on Monday morning. And the tech-heavy KOSDOG opened 1.81%, down at 649. The $1 exchange rate in the Seoul foreign exchange market opened at 1,426, weakening by 6.81. And to tackle the potential economic fallout of the political turmoil, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok, along with the top economic and financial officials, announced the deployment of all possible market stabilization measures to prevent excessive market volatility. And during the emergency meeting with top economic and financial officials on Monday, the government is scheduled to deploy funds of 100 billion Korean won, or around $70 million by next week. It also plans to roll out a second round of stabilization funds worth around $210 million. Now, structural measures to improve foreign exchange liquidity and inflows will also be announced by December. In other news, Russian media outlets say Syria's ousted leader Bashar al-Assad and his family are now in Moscow after being granted asylum. This comes as the rebel militant group HTS took over Damascus on Sunday. Lee Seung-ja has more.
Syria's ousted leader Bashar al-Assad and his family have arrived in Russia after being granted asylum by Moscow. According to Russia's Interfax news agency on Sunday, al-Assad arrived in Moscow, where the former Syrian leader and his family were given asylum on humanitarian grounds. The Russian Foreign Ministry also issued a statement saying that al-Assad decided to leave the presidential post and left the country, while giving instructions to transfer power peacefully. The al-Assad family's reign in Syria came to an end after 53 years on Sunday, after rebel forces captured Damascus. The rebel forces stormed through Syria in a matter of days, with the senior commander of the militant group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham declaring the Syrian capital free from the tyrant. U.S. President Joe Biden on Sunday called the fall of the al-Assad regime a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria. Biden said that the ousting of its former leader meant an opportunity for the country to build a better future. The U.S. president vowed to continue engaging with all groups in Syria to help transition away from the former regime towards an independent and sovereign nation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also praised the fall of the al-Assad regime while suggesting that it was a direct result of Israeli attacks on Iran and Hezbollah. Netanyahu added that with the fall of the Syrian government, the Israeli military had to take positions abandoned by the Syrian army near the border with Israel. Syrians took to the streets across the country to celebrate the fall of the al-Assad regime. Over in the capital, people gave a warm welcome to the rebel fighters who led the ousting of the former leader. The celebratory mood was also evident among the many Syrians who left their country since the civil war. And for many, it's an opportunity for them to return home. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump said he would absolutely consider withdrawing his country from NATO if European allies did not pay their bills. In an interview with NBC News, which aired on Sunday, Trump said European nations have taken advantage of the U.S. on trade, but the U.S. continues to defend them. He added that if the European countries stopped paying their dues, he would consider leaving the military alliance. Now, during his previous term in office, Trump had pressed the European nations to increase their spending, calling for at least 3% of GDP to be allocated to defense for equitable contribution. Over in Sweden, we are just one day away from Nobel Day, where this year's laureates will be honored at an awards ceremony and banquet. Leading up to the big day, Korean author Han Kang, this year's Nobel Prize winner in literature, has been stepping into the spotlight, meeting with the press and the public. Our Song Yujin has more.
After nearly 2 months of keeping a low profile following her Nobel Prize win, Korean author Han Kang has embraced the spotlight at Nobel Week.
This award is given to the literature, and this year I was awarded. This is my conclusion, and this makes me more comfortable.
Now feeling more at ease with her Nobel laureate title, the 54-year-old author shared her journey of uncovering the overarching theme of her work during her Nobel lecture, Light and Thread.
세계는 왜 이토록 폭력적이고 고통스러운가? 동시에 세계는 어떻게 이렇게 아름다운가? 이 두 질문 사이의 긴장과 내적 투쟁이 나의 글쓰기를 밀고 온 동력이었다고 오랫동안 믿어왔습니다.
These questions were etched in her mind at age 12 after seeing photographs of civilians killed during the Gwangju democratization movement. Decades later, while writing her 2014 novel Human Acts, which delves into the tragedy, she discovered that love, not those questions, was at the heart of her storytelling.
우리는 인간성을 믿고자 하기에 그 믿음이 흔들릴 때 자신이 파괴되는 것을 느끼는 것일까? 우리는 인간을 사랑하고자 하기에 그 사랑이 부서질 때 고통을 느끼는 것일까? 사랑에서 고통이 생겨나고 어떤 고통은 사랑의 증거인 것일까?
This connection to love, however, had always been with her. At 8 years old, Han wrote a poem that read, "Where is love? It is inside my thumb-thumping, beating chest. What is love? It is the gold thread connecting between our hearts." Now, she sees writing itself as an act of that love.
소설을 쓸 때 나는 신체를 사용합니다. 심장이 뛰고 갈증과 허기를 느끼고 걷고 달리고 바람과 눈비를 맞고 손을 맞잡는 모든 감각의 세부들을 사용합니다. 그 생생한 감각들을 전류처럼 문장들에 불어넣으려 하고 그 전류가 읽는 사람들에게 전달되는 것을 느낄 때면 놀라고 감동합니다. 언어가 우리를 잇는 실이라는 것을
Han concluded her 30-minute lecture by thanking her readers.
So with two major events in her Nobel Week itinerary completed, up next for the Nobel laureate in literature is attending the Nobel Prize ceremony and banquet on Tuesday, December 10. 송유진, Arirang News, Stockholm.
Good morning, I'm Yoon Seong, and this is The World Now. We begin in the Netherlands. An explosion and fire in an apartment block in The Hague has killed at least 3 people. Local authorities say the incident on Saturday morning also left several injured. The Hague Mayor Jan van Janen said in a press conference that investigators are considering all possibilities, though the exact cause of the explosion remains unclear. Emergency responders are continuing to search for missing persons in the debris of the collapsed building, but the chances of finding survivors appear slim. Authorities have not disclosed how many individuals remain unaccounted for. The apartment building is located in a residential area not far from the city center. Nearby residents reported hearing a loud explosion, followed by screams early on Saturday morning. Pope Francis has called on U.S. authorities to commute the sentences of death row inmates. The appeal was made during the Pope's weekly Sunday prayer at St. Peter's Square, as he asked for prayers for death row prisoners and for their death sentences to be commuted or changed. Pope Francis, a longtime opponent of capital punishment, has consistently advocated against the practice, even urging the Catholic Church to update its teaching in 2018. It is unusual for the Pope to mention specific countries when addressing the issue, making Sunday's remarks notable. According to the nonprofit Death Penalty Information Center, there are approximately 2,250 death row inmates across the United States, including about 40 held in federal custody. Some U.S. Catholic organizations have also called on President Joe Biden to commute federal sentences before his term ends. 5 years after a catastrophic fire devastated Paris' Notre Dame Cathedral, the iconic landmark reopened on Saturday with a commemorative event honoring emergency responders who played a critical role in saving the 860-year-old building from collapse. A total of 160 firefighters dressed in vivid red uniforms received a standing ovation from attendees. Outside the cathedral, the word Merci was projected onto its walls in a heartfelt tribute to their heroic efforts. The event also saw the attendance of prominent international figures, including U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. French President Emmanuel Macron praised the swift restoration work, calling it an achievement of the impossible, and expressed gratitude to everyone involved in saving and rebuilding the cathedral. The cathedral caught fire on April 15, 2019, but restoration was possible thanks to the efforts of firefighters. The red ruby slippers worn by Judy Garland in her role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz have been sold at auction. The iconic shoes were sold in an online auction on Saturday, U.S. local time, for $28 million. In 2005, the shoes were stolen from the Judy Garland Museum in her hometown of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and were only recovered in 2018 after an FBI investigation. Collector Michael Shaw, who had loaned the shoes to the museum, regained possession of them this February and put them up for auction. They are one of 4 surviving pairs of slippers that Garland wore while portraying Dorothy and are considered among the most iconic props in American cinematic history.
It's a bitterly cold morning. Biting winds are making things colder than what the thermometer points to. Make sure to keep your core warm. Layering is key in cold temperatures. And I can't imagine how cold it is in Paju and Taegwallyeong, with a low of nearly minus 13 degrees Celsius in Taegwallyeong. Meanwhile, dry weather alerts are in place for the East Coast. Be careful with anything that could start a fire. Wet weather at the end of the week should help to ease the dryness in the air. Now, afternoon temperatures will be 1 to 3 degrees higher today. Seoul gets up to 6 degrees Celsius, a couple of degrees higher than Sunday in the capital. Daegu and Gwangju top out at 8 degrees. Busan still feels like late autumn with a high of 10 degrees Celsius. Mostly sunny skies will be joined by more clouds in the afternoon. Now, wet weather is in the forecast for the East Coast and west of southern provinces as well as Jeju Island this week. But the capital area stays mostly sunny with early winter air. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up our morning edition of Arirang News. Have a wonderful start to the week.